Hey everyone, Jordan Chand here, head coach at SaberSim. Now, I've been playing DFS profitably for 9 years now, and in my role at SaberSim, I've had the privilege of helping thousands of players improve their game. We've helped create 15 Millie Maker winners, 2 of them specifically in golf DFS. And look, I'm not here claiming to be some golf savant. I just love the game, I understand DFS, and more importantly, I understand what it takes to profit in today's landscape. Because let's be real, if you're watching this, you've probably noticed something about the games. They've gotten harder, way harder. And this week at Royal Portrush, it's going to separate those stuck in 2019 from those ready to profit in 2025. Do you remember when you could just put together high projected cash game type lineups in tournaments and actually make money? Yeah, those days are long gone. If you started playing golf DFS between 2015 and 2020, you probably experienced this golden age. Contest fields were softer, you got more out of projections alone, ownership was way less efficient, and honestly, you could generally get away with being lazy and do pretty well. But here's what happened. The sharp money figured out the edges. The recreational players got smarter, and now almost everyone's using some form of solid projections, an optimizer, or simulation. The old playbook, the one where you're just jamming in the best plays and hoping for the best, that's not just ineffective now, it will actively harm your bankroll. You need to be playing against the field, not with it. And this week at the Open Championship, with Scotty priced 3K above everyone else, Rory carrying all that emotional baggage from 2019 and the chaos of this season, and a links course that can destroy anyone's round in a single hole, if you're still playing like it's 2019, you are about to get a painful reminder that it is not. So here's what actually works now. We call it the SaberSystem, and it's built on 5 core principles that directly address why most players are struggling. The first principle is to understand the odds and focus on expected value. Here's your first truth bomb. You are going to lose most of the time playing golf DFS or any DFS. I know that's probably not what you want to hear, but it's reality. DFS is high variance. Even skilled players might only have one profitable DFS golf tournament every 6 weeks, playing every single event on the calendar. And we've tested this, running bankroll simulations on players with a profitable ROI to see what the swings look like, and that's what you should expect. Now, why is this? It's because the contests themselves are top heavy. Whether you're talking about the Millie Maker or even lower stakes tournaments, first place might be paying out 20% or more of the prize pool, and golf itself is basically controlled chaos. The best player in the world might shoot 75 on any given day. And this week at Portrush, the cut line was +1 last time, with 70 people getting through. The 235-yard 16th hole, they literally call it Calamity Corner, can turn a birdie opportunity into a triple bogey faster than you can say missed cut. So it's time to stop judging your golf DFS process by whether you cashed last tournament. Start focusing on expected value. Are you making plus EV decisions? Over a large sample, that is ultimately all that matters. The second principle, optimize your portfolio of lineups. Diversify your paths to profit. You should be thinking about your DFS bankroll like an investment portfolio. Would you put all of your money into one stock? Of course not. So why are you playing high volume and playing a handful of lineups that are 80% the same? Now, this week's pricing creates more viable lineup constructions than any typical PGA week. You've got Euro Tour specialists priced down at the 6K range who actually know links golf. You've got Scotty up at 14,200, creating massive leverage opportunities for the skilled golfers right below him. There are a ton of different possible lineups that you can play this week, many of which are profitable, and each lineup you play should represent a different way the tournament could unfold. Maybe Scotty does dominate. Maybe the weather ends up destroying the afternoon wave. Maybe a links specialist at 6,500 goes on a heater. Diversification is not about being wishy-washy or not being strong on your takes. It is about acknowledging that in a sport where the best players make birdies 20% of the time, you need multiple diverse shots on goal. The third principle is build, review, revise. This is your 3-step process for actually building your lineups. Now, here's where people mess up with SaberSim. They either trust it completely or think they can't do anything other than what the sims are saying and never review what they're getting, or they override everything and then wonder why they paid for a simulator to just sit there and fight with. The first step here is to build, and that means start clean. Let the first sims you run without your biases. Now, you want to make sure that your notifications are on, which they are on SaberSim by default, and keep an eye out for last-second withdrawals. You generally want to wait as late as you're comfortable with before lock to make sure you have the updated sims, but then it's time to start building. So I'll upload an entries file quickly here to get my contests in that I'm playing. Make 2 changes to player ownership projections here just to abide by DraftKings rules, and go ahead and we'll start building some lineups. Now, as you're building, the sim here is incorporating thousands of data points that you really couldn't possibly process manually. We're accounting for course fit, course history, recent and long-term form, Vegas odds, all kinds of the factors that ultimately come into play here for this event. Now, as your build completes, if you're on SaberSim Ultimate, your contest sims will kick off here, taking into account the actual contests you're playing, the opponents you're competing against in those contests, identifying the most plus EV lineups that you can play for this tournament. After your contest sims complete, the diversification process runs, which is what is optimizing your portfolio, making sure that you're playing a diverse set of different shots on goal across all of your different lineups. Now, the next step here is to review, and the best way to do that is your leverage, your current exposure to a golfer minus the ownership projection. You want to look at who you're overweight on, the highest positive leverage golfers in your pool. Who are you underweight on, the most negative leverage golfers on your pool. In this part of the process, you want to make sure that this aligns with your reads. Maybe you think Rory's going to implode again. That would be valuable insight to bring to the building process, but you don't want to torpedo the player pool because of that one take. You can see in this example here, SaberSim's slightly aligned with you. We're slightly under the field on Rory here, but we're taking a mediated approach here. We're not just deleting Rory from our builds completely, taking a mega stand on a projected 40% owned golfer. We're taking a more subtle fade. The next step is, of course, to revise, and this is where you make targeted adjustments. You want to watch the ROI of your lineups, the expected return on investment, change as you are changing exposures. Let's say you're taking a different stance on Rory. You want to be slightly over the field on him. If we set a minimum exposure to, say, 45%, getting us positive leverage on the field, and then click apply, SaberSim will find a new diversified set and a new portfolio of lineups where you get 45% Rory in your overall portfolio. As you're making these changes to exposures, you want to be mindful of the effect that that's having on your ROI, specifically your min ROI, to make sure you're not playing too many lineups that drop into the negative expected value range. And if you're making a lot of changes and not hitting the exposure levels you want, SaberSim will let you know with a message that we're not hitting your desired exposures. In that case, just click Rebuild Lineups to rebuild a fresh pool, this time based around your particular strategy for the slate. SaberSim will build those lineups, find the most profitable paths, and diversify you a new portfolio to take with you into your contest. Now, let's walk through a couple more examples of how this might apply specifically to this week. As I mentioned before, Scotty's pricing makes a fascinating decision point. He's got 16% odds to win according to our sims, but eats up 14,200 of your salary. So every Scotty lineup that you play is essentially a bet that the field is going to fall apart. And that might happen at Portrush, but what side are you on? SaberSim here is slightly positively leveraged, thinking he's actually a value at his ownership and salary. But maybe you disagree. Maybe you want to bring his max exposure down, or maybe you want to take even a slightly higher stand. Subtle adjustments to get your leverage to move 5 percentage points in either direction is a way to leave your impact on the Scotty decision. Now, what about these elite values in the 5K and 6K range, the Euro Tour guys? Some of these guys grew up playing links golf. Guys like Jordan Smith caught my eye. He has odds that are way better than his salary at 5,900 would indicate, and based on the value we're seeing here, the sims are catching this. Now, it's your job to decide where do you want to lean on this take. SaberSim here is finding him as one of our higher leveraged value plays here, 7% over the field. Where do you want to be in this spot? And again, Rory, everyone's talking about his 2019 meltdown, the quadruple bogey on the first hole, the missed cut. He's going to be massive chalk this week in despite of all that. As you review your portfolio, you'll see the sims have a take on all of these key decision points, but it's your job to understand where you stand. Don't fade the sims entirely, but incorporate them into your research. If we love Scotty and you don't, get closer to the field. If you're all in on Rory, get some positive leverage there. Once you're happy with your overall portfolio, we just click Save to Contests, download an entries file, and we can get this uploaded to DraftKings so that we're ready for the slate. Now, that's not all, though. The fourth principle is to stay on top of the news. And for golf, this is usually just about withdrawals, but it still matters. A big withdrawal would completely change optimal lineup construction. So, as you're building your lineups, you want to watch those notifications popping up on your desktop and rebuild your pool if there are any last minute changes. Finally, the last principle, and a very important one, is to check your work. After slates complete, when the British Open is over, you want to use contest flashback. I know it stings to relive losses, but flashback ROI will show you your true expected value. And you should expect to be profitable when viewing contest flashback about 75% of the time. If not, you know something in your process needs work. This part of the process is crucial. Remember, no one wins every week. The long-term winners know if they can dial in a profitable process that over the course of the season, they're making money. And contest flashback is how you know those wins are coming. Last week's tournament didn't go so well for me. The birdie is a good example of that, where I lost about $4 in entry fees here, but it wasn't a winning slate. But if I look here in contest flashback, I see my expected ROI was 13%. I know that I'm playing in a way that will deliver profit over the long term. This is based on our simulations. We take the real lineups everybody played in the actual contests on DraftKings and re-simulate the slate to see who was expecting to make money over the long term across all of the different ways that the tournament could play out, regardless of what happened on the course in one single instance. SaberSim gives you a ton of power to account for all of this valuable data, plus adding in your takes, but with great power comes great responsibility. Here's the biggest mistakes I see people make every week in golf DFS that you really want to avoid this week. First, if you are going through and restricting your player pool down to 20 or 30 golfers, you're really not playing DFS, you're playing lottery tickets. If you are going through and forcing your min and max exposures for every single player to exist in a very tight band, saying, I expect to have exactly 22% Scotty exposure, you are over-engineering. You should be open to the portfolios that the Sims give you after adding in some boundaries for your takes. You want to incorporate your stands, but not set rigid restrictions. Another big mistake I see is double counting. You might be lowering someone's projection because of a poor course history or course fit or recent form, but guess what? That stuff's already baked into their betting odds, which primarily feeds their projection. So now you've penalized them twice for the same thing. Now again, if you come to a different conclusion about how much exposure is appropriate for a particular golfer based on your research, that's totally fine. That is what reviewing and revising is all about. But you want to be mindful of making adjustments for things that are already factored into the projections. A simple way of thinking about this is any of the data that you see in SaberSim, the ownership projection and some of these detailed stat projections, is ultimately what powers the decisions that the Sims come up with. Maybe you're buying on Scotty outrights this week and you think he's actually under expected for his real probability of winning this tournament. That's a very logical reason to make an adjustment to Scotty. In a nutshell, make small incremental changes to player exposures to golfers that you have a take on, and then see the impact that that is having on your other exposures and your ROIs in your build. You shouldn't feel like you have to predict everything about the tournament perfectly. You can't, I can't, nobody can. But you want to build a process that profits from having casted a wide net of different high upside outcomes, while others are trying to chase precision in an event that is completely full of chaos. Now at this point, I know what you're probably thinking. Jordan, I get it, but SaberSim is expensive. And you're right, we are not cheap. But let me ask you something. How much is your time worth? How many hours do you spend building lineups by hand or on your optimizer of choice? How much have you lost trying to compete against players using those advanced tools with your outdated process? If you're playing at least $1,000 in entry fees per week of Golf DFS, Ultimate, the fully featured version of SaberSim, is going to make sense. Otherwise, SaberSim Starter will give you everything you need to start playing PGA DFS in a more plus EV way immediately. Either way, consider it an investment in actually having a chance. Or here's another one I hear all the time. I don't want to give up control of my lineups. Good. You shouldn't. One of our users said it perfectly in a recent testimonial they gave us after they had a big win. They said, I was convinced my hand lineups were better until I realized it was near impossible to profit long-term that way unless you get extremely lucky. The SaberSim enhances your reads. It doesn't replace them. You're ultimately still the one making final decisions. You just have a co-pilot alongside you the entire way, handling the math side of things. Or maybe you saw me rip through this build just a few minutes ago and thought, that looks extremely complicated. Another testimonial we got from a user said, SaberSim seemed daunting at first because it's so different than any other optimizer. But here's what happened next. They started using our resources. Saber School, which you can find in the upper right corner of the app. Office Hours, our daily live stream Q&A, our Discord community. And in the settings menu of the app, if you click Help, we have step-by-step tutorials for literally everything you need to know to build plus EV lineups for the British Open right now. We have an active Discord server of SaberSim experts ready to share ideas. And after the US Open is over, when you're ready to take the next step and really start dialing in your process, our daily live streams, office hours are hosted every single day where you can ask SaberSim coaches exactly how to improve your process. SaberSim isn't just the tool. We have a team of profitable DFS players whose full-time jobs is to help you succeed. You are not learning alone. So look, the Open Championship starts tonight. The DraftKings Millie Maker is already starting to fill up. FanDuel's flagship contest is filling fast, and the low stakes are getting packed full of people quickly trying to get their entries in. You can keep doing what you've been doing. Keep building those same chalk-heavy, high-projected lineups, keep forcing in rigid player pools and exposures and core plays, and keep wondering why you're not profiting anymore. Or you can try something different. Start a free trial. Give the SaberSystem a shot for the Open. What's the worst that happens? You can go back to what you were doing before. But what if this works? Now here's what I know. The players crushing DFS right now aren't necessarily smarter than you. In fact, they're probably not. They're not luckier than you. They just adapted when the game changed. A SaberSim user on a trial emailed us recently after a big golf win this season and said I was doing my process wrong essentially, and I didn't know that until I got plugged into the SaberSim community. If you're watching this video and you're as excited about the British Open as I am, you probably know a little something about golf, and I'm sure you understand DFS. You just need a process for how the game is played now, not how it used to be played. Royal Portrush is going to create chaos this week. The question is, will you have a system to benefit from that chaos, or will you be another casualty of it? I'm rooting for you either way, but I'd rather see you playing with a system designed to beat Golf DFS in 2025. So head to SaberSim.com to start your free trial. Let's tackle the Open Championship together, and I'll see you in the winner's circle.